Hello fellow doll enthusiast. In this video I want to discuss something with you that's a problem for many people in the doll community, which is sewing doll clothes. If you have problems looking for patterns, I'd like to show you a technique I love using. I've used it time and again. I've clothed all my boys with it. With the right pattern, you know it'll fit your doll, you know what it'll look like, you'll know how to put it together. It makes the whole process easier and more enjoyable. If this is you, I invite you along to use duct tape with me in getting a doll pattern. This is a method I'm really excited about. I swear by it. I've done it time and again. It's given me great results. I've made everything from shirts to pants to night shirts like my boy Jake here is wearing at the moment. And I want something more boyish for him. Alright, let's get started. So here's a few of the materials I use to get a clothing pattern, and it begins with duct tape. Masking tape can also be used, but I prefer duct tape since it's so durable and flexible. Cling wrap to provide a barrier between the duct tape and your precious doll. There's also plastic wrap, but it's not as helpful since it doesn't stick to itself. This doll store gauze is very helpful if I want to fill out areas to get a specific shape or to get a baggy look incorporated into the pattern. To mark my seam lines, a Sharpie. A seam ripper. I use it to get the duct tape up off the doll and safely cut it. This purple one I filed down to use specifically for this job. The blue is what it looks like originally. I found the shank is too long and can possibly gouge a doll, unfortunately. If you decide to try this, please find a way that's comfortable for you and safe for your doll. That said, I still prefer to use the seam ripper due to its ability to lift and cut. Slim edges to help me hold down my patterns while drafting. A few typical cutting implements depending on the need, situation, or the mistakes that was made. Ambience. My volunteer. And poster board. Nikki time. Firstly, I know I want a footy pajama for my boy. To make it more baggy, I layer gauze around the ankles, shins, and forearms. Not only will it make it look more comfortable, it makes getting Jake dressed more easy since I won't have to deal with tight ankles or sleeve areas later on after I'm finished sewing this together. So I use the gauze generously. Next, I start wrapping him in cling film to make removal of the tape possible and protect him from its adhesive and the marker used later on in this process. I like using the doll joints to help me with this process. Makes me feel a little sneaky. Since to make a pattern, all we need is one side of the doll. That's usually all I wrap. One leg, one arm, and the torso. Again, making sure to cover any areas that tape is to be laid down upon. Almost sounds like something a serial killer would say. Now that it's all covered, the duct tape. It's important to note that the duct tape will not work with you. Like right here, it won't form the shape to the back. You have to take it apart, place it specifically, round out areas. It's not going to want to deal with you. You have to deal with it. And when you do use it, please lay it down very gently. You don't want to tighten it. You want to just be laying on the doll as softly as you can. If you tighten it, you won't be able to cut underneath it without cutting your doll unless you're very good with the blade. Now sometimes you might have a situation happen where one piece of duct tape sticks to another and won't let go, or you just don't want to deal with it, so you just kind of fold it over. The less layers you have of duct tape, the better, the easier it comes off. Don't go crazy layering it. You want as few layers as possible to get it up, but at least be strong enough to keep the shape. And it's not very difficult. You see how little these overlap. You do want the overlap, but not a lot. Now, if you try and get some curves into your garment, you have to make sure you use smaller pieces at least limitedly. The more you use, the more difficult it is to cut, but curves are kind of important, so be generous with it, but try not too much. Like here, the chest, 2 pieces, it's fine. It's a flat area. It doesn't need that many pieces to get the shape correctly. Now to get the shape of the armpit area, it's kind of difficult, but if you just use the longest strip of duct tape, you could just tape it down to the rest of the area after you snip it. It'll work just fine. It doesn't have to be a big piece. And right here, I forgot to do the neck, but it's easy. You can still just throw a piece of saran wrap on it, throw some duct tape, as long as it connects to the rest of the suit you just made. Now everything's covered. So the first thing I need to do is mark right down the middle of the body. And I'll need seam lines down the whole side, underneath and running down the whole arm, the outer leg and the inner leg, at least. That'll give you a simple pattern. However, I went a little bit more special with this one, and I gave it a curve going across the crotch and down the leg, as well as across the butt and down the back of the leg, to give it a little bit more of a detail, and I really like details. And the arm is just one single piece. It starts in the armpit, juts all the way almost to the neck, and comes all the way back around. It's not like a regular shirt shape. It gives it just a little bit more specialty look to it. And sometimes you have to get into strange situations. All done. Again, I find that the seam ripper is the easiest way to get into it underneath the duct tape without hurting the doll too much. Scissors are too bulky. It's the only thing I found. It works for me. When you get it loose enough, they'll come almost right off. Be careful. If there is permanent marker that's not dry on the form, it might get onto your hands, which I did not have. And right here, I'm just cleaning it up a little bit. Everything I don't need comes right off. And this is just cutting all the seam lines I made onto the doll. If you need to, mark the pieces before you take them off, like front chest, front leg, back leg, inner thigh, outer thigh, left back, whatever you need to do, just to make sure that you know where pieces go. It's very important because you can't sew this incorrectly, assuming one piece goes somewhere else. You can see how the duct tape just wants to keep the form of what it just came off of. And that really does help in making a form-fitting, or at least a very accurate shape of the garment you want. Next is just making the pattern. For me, I know I use about a 1/4 inch more for the seam allowance. So, what's that? I decided that this piece right here will be set onto a fold. So I don't need to make a seam allowance for that back area right there. That will go into a fold of fabric. When I cut it out, it'll come off left and right leg. But other than that, the seam allowance for everything else will still be there. As you can see, the whole area is surrounded by seam allowance except for that back area. And I mark out the rest of the pieces like that as well. Although some pieces get special treatment, like this is the front left and right leg. I need a button panel, so I will mark out a little area with extra fabric so it can have space to fold on top of itself for extra support for buttons I need. So it's very important to think ahead. But this is kind of more of a more difficult pattern to do. All done. Next step is to just cut these pieces out. These are all the pieces that'll make up the garment I need. And all of them are just done right on the line. Easy enough. Making sure the folds are marked on the pattern. Now with all the pattern pieces cut, I can start actually cutting the fabric. Beautiful fabric. So of course, when you're doing sewing, you have a right side and a wrong side to the fabric. depending if there's prints or whatever on the front or the back, you want to make sure you flip your pattern piece accordingly. Otherwise, you'll have one left arm that has the pattern and one right arm that's inside out. So be careful with how you place it. Now this is the fold pattern piece I was telling you about. Right there, that's the back piece. There's gonna be a little gap in the middle of the back. That's fine, as long as I line up the two edges of it, it should still work. There shouldn't be any weird things going on, as long as I cut it right. So here I made sure to lay all the fabric pieces on top of its original pattern so I can track what goes where, what's left, what's right, and not put something on backwards. This is very special. That little piece, if you're not careful, can suck your fabric in. I like to just use a simple piece of notebook paper to give it more strength so it don't get sucked into the machine. If I had a bigger piece, it'd be fine. I have more of a seam allowance, but since I use smaller seam allowances, it goes into the machine. Just a little bit to start up, go forward and back to secure the thread down. It won't go in. Other than that, with the size I use for my seam allowance, it makes it more difficult. I would not get anywhere, at least until I get halfway down the piece of fabric. And I can see the curves of what's happening with the fabric as well. Like there's the butt area, there's a curve, the thigh, there's a curve, and indentation for the knee. I make sure to line those up. If I don't, it will turn out a little wonky. It will try to spin on itself. I try to avoid that as best I can. So I line it up by hand as I sew. And again, a small scrap of notebook paper to make sure the material does not get sucked into the machine. But not all pieces of the pattern required me to have to pay attention to every curve or divot. Some are straight lines, I can use my needles and go for it. So to reiterate, this video is more of an introduction into what you could do with duct tape and how you can make it work for you to get a certain doll pattern that you've been thinking about. So I'm going to just skip through the sewing area. I might do in a later video, but I think to show you the end results. And here's my boy Jake with his new jammy using duct tape. With the duct tape pattern, I almost always expect a great outfit. This method has helped me so much. I'm not a professional sewer. When I first did this, it took me a lot of trials, a lot of errors, but if I keep on practicing and getting better at it, that's what it's about. You get more effective, you get more efficient, you'll get the outfits you want that you can't find nowhere else, not even patterns. So if this is something you're interested in, please try this out. If it's even a booty, like these nice little feet, or a back piece, or some gauntlets, please try this. It will help immensely. So at the end of this video, if you do decide to try this, please be careful, be mindful of your tools and your doll, and take care, be careful, and make something amazing. Thank you for watching, and good luck if you decide to try this.